Today we're walking through how to assemble your very own Umbrel Bitcoin node. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Welcome back to another video. My name is Ian Major. I'm an entrepreneur, Bitcoin pleb, and all-around raging capitalist. And yes, in today's video, I am pretty excited to be continuing our Bitcoin node series. I have done a couple videos in the past, one as just a sort of survey of the lay of the land of, what is a Bitcoin node? Why would you want to potentially run one? And then I've also done a video on the sort of easiest possible plug and play method that at least I'm aware of, which involves basically getting all the kind of hardware as well as a nice little casing from Crypto Cloaks, where they essentially do all the assembly for you. And then once you receive it, you basically plug it in and away you go. And so I will link that in the description down below if you feel that that is more your style. But in today's video, as promised, a little while ago, I want to go into the kind of do-it-yourself version. So we're going to be talking about what are the different parts that are required to make this happen. And then we're going to be showing how to assemble those parts until you have your own working Umbrel Bitcoin node. So that's the game plan. For those returning to the channel, welcome back, my friends. As always, it is a pleasure to have you. And for those new to the channel, and I know there are many of you, there are still over 80% of you watching right this very moment that are not currently subscribed. And so if you like this content, I invite you to consider subscribing and join us in our merry gang in cyberspace. I cover all manner of Bitcoin related topics, including tutorials like this on nodes, wallets, different hardware, software, news, analysis, you name it, I cover it, all to help you in your quest towards financial sovereignty. So if that sounds interesting, I invite you to subscribe. But with all that out of the way though, let's go ahead and jump into the meat for today. And we're gonna begin first with the required ingredients. Started. It is getumbrel.com. I will put this in the description down below, of course. And you should see this sort of homepage, a personal server for everyone. In some of their latest updates, they've introduced quite an interesting set of self-hosting apps. So, they're clearly making a play not just for a kind of Bitcoin and Lightning node, but also for a sort of personal server, which is cool. I think there's debate on whether that's actually a good thing to do, or whether that introduces additional attack surface for your node. But nonetheless, Umbrel is doing some absolutely incredible things, and so it is with good reason that they are honestly one of the most popular node implementations. And so if you're totally new to nodes, again, check out my other video that I've done where I talk about what is a node, what are the different sort of flavors out there in the market, and why I think Umbrel is a really, really good starting choice for someone, particularly if you're not super technical. So what we want to basically do is go to this build your Umbrel link. And this is just going to take us down the page to some instructions. Here we can see install Umbrel on a Raspberry Pi 4. This is what we are going to do for today. The Raspberry Pi 4 is, probably one of the most common computers that is used for running Bitcoin nodes today. There is also the, installation process on Linux. But if you're running Linux, you probably don't need this tutorial anyway. So what's really nice is they list out the recommended hardware and include links to buy them on Amazon, which is really nice. So for example, if I go to this Raspberry Pi 4, I will be brought to an Amazon link to do this. And you can see that for each and every one of these pieces. So let's just talk through them quickly. So the Raspberry Pi 4, this is the quote-unquote computer, right? A node is nothing more than a computer. The Raspberry Pi 4 is that sort of motherboard, if you will. And so you can also see on this, and if we go back to here, it's got all the different kind of connection points as well for different USB connected devices, for power, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I'm going to show you the physical versions of this as well in just a moment, but for now, I'm just kind of rattling through what you will need. The next piece is this at least 1 terabyte SSD. And so think of this as like the hard drive, right? This is where you're going to store all the data for the computer. Think about it. The Bitcoin blockchain at this point is hundreds of gigabytes in size. And so you need a pretty solid drive to store that data. And so this is that component. Now, you could go big and do 2 terabytes to really future-proof, because as the blockchain grows, the amount of data on your node will grow as well. Your node is staying synced with the full and entire Bitcoin blockchain. Now, we're years away from it going above 1 terabyte. So honestly, 1 terabyte is probably fine for now. But again, if you really want to future-proof this, you could bump this to a 2 terabyte drive. The next thing that's being recommended, and I would certainly echo this, is an enclosure for that drive. So if you open this guy up, you'll see that it's just a pretty simple little kind of see-through casing where you can put your drive. I think it's got some examples of what this could look like in practice. Now, what you'll see for my node that I will be doing this example on is that I've actually got a case, sort of custom shell from CryptoCloaks. And so I will link them in the description down below. I think it's really, really cool. They can give you this nice little, housing for your node. Both for, the Raspberry Pi and the SSD drive will go in this, and I will show you what that looks like as well. The next piece is a 16 gig micro SD. So these are pretty simple and standard, right? You could do, I think it's at least 16, maybe get 32 to be safe. That's what this link forwards you to. Honestly, it probably can't hurt to get multiple of these, particularly if you ever plan to or are doing partially signed Bitcoin transactions with like hardware wallets like Cold Card, and other things like that. So I personally think you can never get enough micro SD cards. So you could grab a couple if you want, but you only need one, to be clear. And so the purpose of this guy is this is what you are going to essentially install the Umbrel operating system on, right? So these are all the hardware pieces, but you need to obviously install the software that we want to the node. And so the micro SD card is the path for doing that, as you will see in a moment. The next piece is a power supply. So basically this is what's going to power on the Raspberry Pi. So what will happen is the Raspberry Pi will be connected to the SSD, and then the Raspberry Pi will be plugged into a power outlet. And so they recommend getting the official Raspberry Pi charger, which I would echo. So again, it's this kind of USB-C charger, right? Of course, this can and will look different for different kind of countries. So be sure to check that. This is for a US plug, of course. Optionally to the power supply, you could also get a backup sort of battery. For example, power outages are not good for nodes. You really want this thing to be running at all times, always. There can be some difficulties and challenges that come up when the power goes out. And so you could optionally get a sort of backup power supply if you so wish. And then the final piece is this Ethernet cable. So this is what's going to plug your node into your internet router. Okay, so you need to have, of course, I mean, it kind of goes without saying, you need to have, some form of high-speed internet, because this thing is going to download, the full blockchain, and it's going to continue to sync that as time goes on. And so this is essentially how we connect our node to the internet. It will be directly connected to your router. And then lastly, here is this case. So this would be kind of an overarching, case for your node. This is pretty nice. Again, you could do a sort of swankier custom version of this through Crypto Cloaks, which I, again, really, really like, and you'll see an example of it. But this is a nice kind of alternative as well. The final optional piece here is some sort of fan. This, to be clear, this is obviously not an ASIC miner, right? Which are way bigger, way heavier duty machines. And so this little guy is really not going to be like generating much heat, but you could still optionally get a little fan that will ensure that it's not overheating. Again, purely optional. But if you do want to get that, I would recommend this Pimori fan shim for Raspberry Pi, again from Amazon. And this is what it looks like. It just sort of sits on your device. So let me show you now what each of those actually looks like in reality. All right, so let's check out all of our goodies. So the first thing I want to show is the Raspberry Pi. So there it is. This has all the different kind of connection pieces where you would plug it, where you would connect this to the drive for power. And then, as you will see later on, the fan shim is just going to kind of sit on this as well. So there you go. I also have my SSD. Now, this example, I am using a pre-assembled, or I'm disassembling a pre-assembled node from CryptoCloaks. And so they've actually kind of stuck it to the bottom of this casing with some adhesive, so I didn't want to kind of rip it off. But there you go. This is basically what it should look like. And then you should also have one of these guys that comes along with it that will plug into the SSD and then connect to the computer. Okay, so this should basically, I know these are slightly different than the Amazon examples that Get Umbrel uses, but this should essentially be what that looks like. The next piece I've got is my little micro SD. I've got a 32 gig SanDisk micro SD here. These little guys are tricky, but there you go. Kind of hard to see. Doing a horrible job showing that, but micro SD card, there you go. Next, we've got the fan shim. So this is the Pimora fan shim. And so again, this is going to just basically sit on top of the Raspberry Pi 4. It's got a little dust on it. I'm cleaning off. Next, we've got our power cable. So as you can see, this is the this is actually not the official Raspberry Pi 4 charger, but I would recommend that if at all possible. But again, pretty simple. USB-C and then the plug. Pretty simple there. Then I have an Ethernet cable. So this is again what I will use to connect the Raspberry Pi 4 to my router so that it has access to the internet. And then lastly, I've got this this nice case. So again, this is what I've got from CryptoCloaks. You can see it's customized, so pretty slick, honestly. Not gonna lie, pretty awesome. But this is what will house everything once we've got it assembled. So there you go. We've gone through the components. Let's now jump in on how to actually install all this. All right, we are now ready to put it all together. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to race through the steps just as an overview that Umbrel provides. It's actually a very helpful guide. And then I'm going to obviously go one by one through each of them. So if we hit this how to install link, we've got all our parts ready. So step one is complete. What we would do next is to download the Umbrel OS. So we're going to download the Umbrel operating system onto our computer. So I'm going to actually go ahead and do that. And as you can see, it is now downloading. The next thing we're going to need is what's called this Balena etcher. And so this is what's going to essentially flash the operating system file that we've just downloaded onto the micro SD card. So I am also going to download Balena etcher. It'll take you to balena.io/etcher, and you'll pick whatever appropriate operating system that you are working on. And so I'll download this as well. So with those downloading, we've got the software we now need. And so I'm just going to race through the following steps and then perform them live. So after this, we're now going to plug the micro SD card into our computer. From there, we're going to flash the Umbrel OS by opening Balena etcher and flashing what we just downloaded, just this whole zip file onto the micro SD card. From there, we're gonna insert it into the Pi. We're gonna connect the Pi to our drive. And then we're going to connect the Pi to the router. I'm also going to put the optional fan shim on. And then at that point, we can plug in the power supply. And that's really it. And then at that point, let the device boot up. But after about 5 minutes or so, you should be able to go to http umbrel.local on any computer that is also connected to the same network as your Raspberry Pi. I.e., if you're plugging your Pi into your internet router and you have a laptop that's also connected via Wi-Fi to that router, you should be able to just open up a browser and see your Umbrel dashboard. So not too difficult, but let's actually now go through each of those steps in turn. So I've got Balena etcher up. This is really easy. You just basically open the installer that you downloaded from the prior step. And this is what you should see without having this in the middle. So I've basically got my micro USB in my computer through an adapter. So if your laptop doesn't have a micro USB slot directly, you may need an adapter. But first we're going to just say flash from file, because that's what we did. We downloaded a file. I'm going to select this Umbrel file and I'll hit open. And then you would select the device that you're using. So I've got a USB adapter that I've got my micro SD plugged into. It's a 32 gig SD card. And so I'll go ahead and hit select, and then we will hit flash. It'll ask if I want to allow this app to make changes. I'll say yes. And away it goes. So we'll give this a minute to complete and come right back. All right. So we've got our micro SD all flashed. So Balena etcher will just come. It'll unpack, flash it, validate it, and then it'll come up with a green check if everything went well. You can then eject the micro SD. And so we've now got our little guy there. And so what I'm going to do is put this into the Raspberry Pi. So you'll see kind of attached to the bottom, there's this little slot for the micro SD. And so you'll put it with the gold stripes sort of facing the chip. And so it'll go in like that. and that's it. Now I'm also going to put the optional fan shim on as the next step as well. So again, this will come just like this if you choose to get this little fan shim, and you can kind of see the holes along the top here are going to be anchored onto these little guys up here. And so it'll just sort of plop on like that. Okay. So I've got the fan shim on, and we've got our micro SD in. Now the next step is to basically get this connected to the drive. So first I'm going to take the sort of drive connector and get it plugged in, and I'm also going to do this in the shell. So we're going to kind of build the shell as well. Again, I will leave a link to CryptoCloaks if you are so curious to get the customized shell. I think they're pretty cool, but you can, of course, as we showed earlier, get a more generic one. So I'm going to get this plugged in like so. So again, all I did was plug that in, ensuring that this can come out of the back like that. There we go. And then we're basically going to start layering this on top. So the next sort of layer is this guy. And so this is where the Raspberry Pi is going to sit. So you can sort of see there's this kind of smaller outline where the Raspberry Pi is going to sit, just like that. And so we'll go ahead and place this in, ensuring that the different ports here are all lined up with the grooves. So there we go. At least in the case of CryptoCloaks, you also get these kind of small screws. Now, I'm not really sure if you would get these as part of the, if you just were kind of ordering all this manually, but this is useful because it lets you basically screw down the Raspberry Pi in place. So if you look closely, you'll see these yellow holes, right? But those 4 yellow holes will allow you to anchor the Raspberry Pi in place. So I'm going to use a very small hex key, and I'm going to screw each of these in, and we'll be right back. Right, so we've screwed this in. One note, if you are using the Pimora fan shim, you do want to put that little screw in before you lay the fan shim on. But now this is nice and secure in place on our frame. And so we will basically now plug this in to our Raspberry Pi. Like so. So now we've got the drive on the very bottom layer plugged in and connected to, via this USB port, our Raspberry Pi. Now what we want to do is assemble the rest of the shell. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Basically this next layer, if you got any kind of different color, the accent color is what this next layer will be. And so that sits, as you can see, just nicely over the different ports. And then finally you have the very kind of top layer, just like that. So I'm going to go ahead and screw these big screws in, and we'll be right back. All right, and so there we've got the CryptoCloaks shells are designed to where these big screws are going to be completely flush along the top. But you'll see we now have our node. Again, to recap, we have the SSD drive on the bottom. If you weren't using a CryptoCloaks casing, you could have just ordered the case that we looked at earlier. And again, that's being plugged in to the Raspberry Pi, which has the micro SD card that we flashed the Umbrel operating system on via Boolean Etcher. And then optionally, we had the fan shim that we plopped on top. And so now there's really just 2 steps remaining. I'm going to plug my Ethernet cable into this port and then connect the other end into the router. And then finally, I'm going to connect the power cable into this furthest over to the side here port. So I'll show you what that looks like here in just a moment. All right, so here she is. We've got the Ethernet cable plugged in, as you can see, and that is in turn plugged into my router. And then I've also got the power cable plugged in as well. You should see lights come on when you, it's hard to see, but you can sort of see there's a light in there. You should see a light come on when you plug it in, and then just give it 5 minutes or so to boot up, and it should be ready to roll. All right, so we waited a couple minutes for the node to boot up, and then once that happens, you can go to umbrel.local, and you should see the interface. Now, I've already kind of set my wallet and everything up on this, and that's why I'm being presented with the login screen. And so if you're booting this up for the very, very first time and you've never done anything on it before, then you will see something slightly different, and you'll see a sort of onboarding that will guide you through getting down your seed words for your wallet and all that good stuff. But if I log in, you can see that here we are. So if you haven't seen Umbrel before, it is pretty slick. So once you do your backups and seed phrase and all that good stuff, you'll be presented with the with your dashboard. I've got everything denominated here in sats, but you can change that back and forth. You'll see that you have a Lightning wallet. So this is both a Bitcoin full node and a Lightning node in one, which is great. You can see the status of the synchronization with the blockchain. So I've had mine offline for a little bit, so it's got a bit of catching up to do. Excitingly, it's got block 700,000, which is cool. So maybe I'll grab some popcorn and watch. But the very first time you're synchronizing, I mean, it could take a couple days. So just be patient and let that complete, and make sure that nothing, there's no kind of power outage, nothing that disrupts that synchronization process. And then you've got your core Bitcoin wallet as well. And each of these wallets sort of functions as you would expect. You've got the send and receive. So I'm not going to go in depth into Umbrel. I will do that in another video, because there has been some very cool stuff that's being added in terms of the apps, which you can find over on the left here. I've got the mempool added, but there's a lot of others that you can add in the app store. So there's all sorts of stuff here now, which is very, very cool. You can connect a variety of different wallets. You can see the drop down here is quite extensive. So different wallets there. And so that's that. We'll go ahead now and close this video out. Again, I'm going to do more videos on Umbrel in the future to deep dive into some of the specific UI and some of the apps that are quite powerful. But be patient with this. So that wasn't too bad, but there's all sorts of things that can get frustrating with this stuff. So just be patient, take your time, and all will be well. Let's go ahead and conclude this video. All right, so there you have it, my friends. Just as a quick recap, we looked at the required parts that go into assembling a Bitcoin node. We went through the full process of downloading the Umbrel operating system, flashing that onto our SD card, and all the other assembly that went along with it. And so hopefully you see that, yes, this is the kind of do-it-yourself version, but I don't think it's too intimidating. And hopefully this sort of demystified things for you if you've thought of, oh, I would, love to maybe run a Bitcoin node, but I have no idea where to even start. Hopefully this helped demystify that whole process. And again, if you haven't already, I would encourage you to check out my other videos that I've done, one of which goes into the sort of why behind running a Bitcoin node. I think it's more important now than ever, and it will become ever more important as we go into the future. But I hope you found this video valuable and useful. If you did, you already know what to do. Give this video a like, comment down below with your thoughts, questions, reactions. What other topics or themes would you like to see covered in future videos? I really do take that into account when making the schedule for the channel. But for now, we are going to go ahead and leave this here. This space moves super duper fast. So again, if you're not subscribed, I encourage you to do so, and you will always stay on top of the latest and greatest. But for now, we'll leave this here. As always, my friends, every cent counts. And until next time, I'll see you then.